We will try to start with a bit of a high-level view on the topic, and then we will drill down more in detail into the different areas as we proceed. So my name is Johannes. I'm currently the CTO at TECHNIA, and I have been dealing with PLM and PLM implementations for more than 20 years, and most of them as part of TECHNIA, and have been fortunate to work with a lot of different companies across different industries, and hope that we can bring some of that experience useful by sharing it internally and also with you guys. So to get started, I often like to use analogies talking about PLM because it's kind of an abstract topic, I mean IT in general. And I think that a house is a pretty good analogy for a PLM system. It's not really a tool that you buy, it's something that you build and something that you're going to exist inside as a company. And it has to fulfill certain functions to give value. And this illustration shows what might happen if you don't get it right from the beginning. Then it doesn't help what kind of tools you have, how clever architects or how clever carpenters and masons you have to build it if it was wrong from the beginning. So of course these seem like quite stupid examples, but then if you translate it to the world of PLM and IT, these things happen all the time. Perfectly designed function that is of no use at all for different reasons, and some of those reasons we are going to look into today. So let's hang on to this house analogy for a while. So when I joined or started working with PLM some years back in the previous century, a PLM solution, PLM system was something that you had to build from scratch, more or less, because the concept, the notion of out of the box didn't exist. So back in the days, you basically started out with a toolkit, and then based on the customer requirements, you built something that would hopefully bring value to the customer. So that's more the traditional classical application or system integration application development approach. You would create a data model that fit the specific needs of the customer, develop all functionalities, all user interface that is needed to realize a PDM system. Of course, some people still choose to do that if they're willing to invest the time and money that it takes. But what has happened in the meantime, and what is more or less the most common way of doing it today, is that you start by buying a platform with one or more out-of-the-box applications that are hopefully quite close to what your business needs. But in most of the cases and in reality, there will always be gaps, like you also heard this morning from Van der Lande, from JM and others. And I think my presentation today will be mainly about this mindset. How do you proceed from that? You buy something that more or less fits your need, and how do you bring that into a solution that really fits your business? Again, that is analog to a house. There's a reason why all houses are not the same. There's always some specific requirements, specific needs that you have to address. Then, if you look at what has happened during the last few years, and it's still ongoing, is that Enovia has transformed into a much broader platform for all sorts of collaboration, not only PLM. And it's a very clear direction that both you as companies and as industries, but also the software providers are heading towards the cloud and even more standardized and ready-made solutions. And as part of that, of course, also the tools and techniques and the ways that we have to implement and work with these solutions have changed and evolved over time. So even though that we're starting to get quite far away from the toolkit approach, it is still not so that, at least not for a larger company, you don't install a PLM system and start using it. It is definitely a lot of activities that has to be done to adapt to the organization and also to figure out how to use the system. So it's not only about starting to change things and build staircases that goes into the wall. It is also about understanding how to use and how to benefit the most from the system. So, and I think that to illustrate that and also to kind of establish a mental picture of how to approach, I think that again, if we relate to something physical, I think it's quite clear to most people that if you really want to have full freedom, you go with the architect drawn house. Then you can decide everything yourself, but you also expect that this is going to be quite expensive and take time, and you have to have a team of architects to figure out what is the best solution, and you don't really have to start from anything solid. If you compare that to out of the box, that is more like buying a catalog house. Then you can choose from some basic models, and you choose the one that is closest to your need. But then you are, in most of the cases, you are able to make changes. You can adapt it a bit. You can maybe move some walls, add windows, add on a garage on the side. But if you want something like the one on the left, then you don't start with that one. Again, this seems pretty obvious, but if you relate this to PLM, this is what quite often happens, surprisingly enough. You buy something like that, and then eventually figure out that, no, it was more like that one with a flat roof, and then you start customizing and changing and taking out walls and making big changes, changing the plumbing. Then you're in dangerous terrain. And that is exactly the same with a PLM system. If you start to do fundamental changes and start trying to make it do something it was not designed to do, you will be in trouble. So I think that is one of the main messages from me in this presentation, is that if you choose the out-of-the-box approach, you should respect that there is some intention behind what you have bought. There is usually some thinking behind what is the purpose of this solution. And if it doesn't fit, then it might be better to go back to the architect and make something that is really custom-made. Maybe as an addition, but still not tweak the standard platform, the standard applications to do something they shouldn't. And I also think an interesting thing, just to also compare it to what are the expectations if you buy a cloud-based or other software as a service. Then in most of the cases, you are more than willing to accept that this solution is working exactly as it is delivered from the vendor. You log in, you start using it. And that is a bit the same as when checking into a hotel. You don't expect to be able to change all that much in the hotel room, unless you're some Saudi Arabian sheikh or a world famous rock star. So it's a lot about the mindset, and that's the most important thing here, that you decide on an approach, then you should be true to that approach. So if you want something unique, then you should build something unique from scratch. Agile methodologies. So what if you are not developing something from scratch? Of course, with a toolkit or, let's say, system development approach, then you would start with nothing, and you have to figure out what is the end result. If you do it out of the box, then you start with something. Maybe it is a car that is working, or a house that you could theoretically live in. Then, of course, you should again consider carefully. You could make it fly if you really want to. You could also mess up quite dramatically. And both of these are very, let's say, realistic alternatives that happens sometimes in customer projects. So again, I think the main message here is that if you choose to start from something that has a standard set of capabilities, then you should also plan and execute your project based on that fact. A little bit though, because you will anyway eventually get to the point where you want to make changes, and that's also some of the stories we heard this morning, that you want to make changes because of usability, for instance, or to improve the user efficiency, or to improve the overall process, and that is not wrong in itself. So the point here is to just make sure that you make a justified decision when doing that. And I think that in most of the cases, that is what companies do in collaboration with us and other vendors. But sometimes there are some important factors that are forgotten. And I think that one risk that we have seen is that quite often the focus is on you focus on what is the benefit. So and if you start looking at what is the real cost of doing it, it's quite easy to forget about the more long-term cost. So what is quite often what is calculated and used as a criteria is the cost of implementation. How much effort is it to make this change or to develop this function? But that is usually only one small part of the total cost. So especially the cost of maintaining the customization or addition, and the cost of future upgrades. That is also sometimes hard to predict. And I think it's also important to know that even if you make a modification to a system in the smartest possible way, which some of them we are going to tell you about today, every addition, every change, everything that you make you deviate from standard will have a cost over time. So all additions, all customizations, all configurations have a cost, even if they might not be that visible. And if they're not visible in the everyday operations, it will be visible when you get to an upgrade. And we will get back to this in more detail, also more specifically what to do to meet these, let's say, important criteria that will make your business and your users happy. If you look a bit more into benefits, so what should be on the right side of the scale? Some of the things that we typically drive decisions in a PLM project is different measures to either reduce time, to cut cost, or improve the quality. And that has also been presented from the stage earlier today, that these are reasons why you start with PLM in the first place. And I think that the same criteria should also be applied when you before making decisions to change anything in the system. So first of all, establish that you have understood how a certain module or functionality is meant to be used. Then when you start looking into improving, whether it's to improve user efficiency or to save time, to really establish some metrics that you can use to justify why you want to do it, because somehow you have to compensate for the added cost that you will have by starting to make changes. And if any one of you has ever built a house or refurbished an apartment, you know that there will always be surprises and there will always be changes, and all of these clearly will have a cost. I mean, budget overruns are as common in the private life as in business. So every little additional thing that you say yes to will drive the cost. So just to mention a few of the things that typically are relevant from a business point of view, is to reduce the cost in finding data. I think that has been mentioned several times today, that if you have good search mechanisms, that is clearly something that can be measurable. If your engineers spend a lot less time looking for information, actually finding the components and documents that they need to be able to reuse things that have been done before, and to rather than running around asking people where that information is, you can find it directly in the system. It's also, at least in industrial companies, usually a lot of focus on time to market. How can you reduce the lead time of your products, for instance? Establishing more efficient ways of working. Also to be able to iterate faster, so not only get faster to the goal, but also being able to have multiple iterations before you get to the final solution. To be able to sort out problems and to reduce the number of errors, which is also part of the quality aspect. That if you are in control of the information, then you can trust it, and it will be the risk of errors when you get to production or purchasing, it is much lower. And the same with scrap and rework. If the information that you send downstream is correct, which will, in most of the cases, lead to higher productivity. So without going into all of this, I think that some of you have been working with PLM for a long time, you would recognize this. But we think it's important that you also this is not only the criteria why you should start a PLM project, you should also look back to this criteria when you make decisions during the project. We need to have this additional report. We have to change the user interface so it looks like this instead of that. Can you really link that to business benefits in your company? And the company, of course, consists of nothing but people, so that even if it's not a benefit that is necessarily quantifiable as a benefit to the company or the process as such, it's also a number of things that will help you get happy and productive users that will lead to benefits for the company. And I think that search is a good example. If you have good ways to search, you can find information quicker. That's something that's quite easy to measure. That you can trust the information to make the decisions based on information that is reliable, rather than a random copy of a document that you don't really know the version, where it comes from, or what is the valid. Be sure that this is the valid information. It is also to a larger and larger extent about understanding information, understanding the context. So not only finding information and documenting it in a, let's say, engineering way, but that you have both visualization, 2D and 3D, and that you can really see, understand, and relate to the context that this information is going to be used in. Also, for instance, as a 3D model of a larger scale that you have seen from ESS, for instance, where you can actually see the full ESS facility in 3D. Or as the example you saw from Van der Lande about having a more visual way of making the product structure, not only as tables or endless tables of information, but that you can see how the product is composed and use it for the understanding, not only for the experts, but for everybody who needs to relate to product information. And using this properly, it will also help the users to help them to do things right, rather than having to figure it out for themselves. So with the clever use of workflows, task assignment, automation, the users will to a large extent be guided towards what they need to do in the system. And these are, of course, also criteria that could be used to decide whether it makes sense or not to make a change. One important aspect when it comes to end users is to be sure that you, whatever request you have, validate that this is really representative. Is this something that is true only for a very small group of users, or does it have an impact on a larger part of the user community? And that, of course, adds a lot more value if it's something that benefits the larger group of users rather than experts in one narrow domain. One good tool that we are using quite often is in order to be able to kind of visualize what are the benefits and how do they relate to, let's say, business drivers. I know that as a PLM consultant, when working on PLM implementation, when discussing with customers, you are quite often in this area, where you're focusing more on what to do rather than why. And talk a lot about the solution, a lot about what kind of changes you want to make, or what kind of technology, what kind of solutions enable the changes, and what kind of changes you want to do. But to be able to link that to the language of the managers and the people who own the budget, it's also important to consider the left side of this picture, where you have the business drivers more on a high level for the company. What are your objectives you want to reach, and what are the measurable benefits? Because that is where you can start to put numbers behind and make a calculation. And it's also, this might look a bit complex, but it's also quite difficult sometimes to make a connection directly from the right side, where you have technology, to the left side, where you are purely on the business side. So I think that sometimes to build the story, to be able to explain how things are, what is affecting what, and how it leads to benefits, you have to do that in multiple steps. So a PLM system or a PLM application in itself is maybe hard to relate to the daily life of the CEO of a company. But if you're able to link it to business critical business drivers, that makes a much stronger story and much easier to get the attention of the people who are more concerned about the money side of things. So in this in this example, for instance, it shows how if from the market, what is happening in the market is that the customers want to have more customized products. And on the technical side, we are talking about variant management. So for a PLM consultant, that connection might happen automatically. But for everyone else to explain how that fits together, it might be good to have some guidance on how you make the reasoning behind that and how that can lead to specific benefits. Some examples on how to quantify. You can see it from a more general point of view, from a more business point of view. These are typical time or savings, typical benefits based on investigations done by SIM data. So that is usually what you do if you don't have anything else. These are more typical improvements, typical savings that you can expect. If you want something more solid, then you should do as this company did, one of our customers, when moving from a legacy PLM system to a new modern PLM platform. They actually made a benchmark and they measured a number of use cases, quite many actually, in their system. How much time did the end users spend on certain tasks, like searching, for instance. So as one of the good examples, searching for parts was improved by 95%. And then by calculating the number of hours spent, the number of engineers, they came to a quite decent saving of $325K in this case. Same with document search. And they did this very methodically for a lot of different use cases. I think it was some, at least 18, it was maybe even more, where they were able to calculate savings of 60,000 man-hours per year in transition from the old system to the new system. And if you have this kind of figures, that makes it quite easy also to build a business case that is reliable not only for the entire project, but also for individual changes that you want to do with the system or do because it makes sense. So if you look at our experience, my experience, I think that looking at our customer base and past projects, I think that most of the companies I've worked with, they are pretty bad at. Some are quite good at creating a good business case when they start. Most companies are pretty bad at actually measuring what was the benefit that you ended up with. And it doesn't have to be really complex and magic. You can, even if this is not the full picture, it's still enough to justify let's say to motivate the effort that you put into the PLM solution. So to wrap this up a bit, key takeaways. Hopefully some of you with longer experience know this already. I have to glue this to the desk. So if you haven't got it yet, only change the system if it adds value, and that you can prove and document and measure that it adds value, not because it's nice or because someone thinks it's a good idea. If you need to change something, and you will, do it in a smart way. And that is very much the topic for the rest of the day, sharing a bit with you how we do this how we think is the best way based on our experience to avoid many of these problems, so high maintenance cost, upgrade issues, and so on. Like I already mentioned, always consider the life cycle cost for a change, not only the small effort initially to change something. And I think a good example of that is if you start changing things that are more deep down in the system, like changing data models, policies, business rules, deep down in the system. That is something that you sometimes can do with a few mouse clicks, then you're done. But that is something that will haunt you for the lifetime of the system. If you do things more on the user interface level, however, that is usually much safer and also something that will normally change over time. So don't mess with the plumbing and the wiring. Keep it as it is. Measure before and after. I think we all could be much better at that, because we quite often claim that we do this because it's required, we do it because it's important to the business, but are we really able to prove it? And that as a kind of introduction to what we are going to talk about for the rest of the day. So already mentioned, we are going to dive more into how to design a solid, reliable PLM application. We're going to talk about automated deployment, how to optimally configure and adapt the system if you need to start to do changes, how to manage your project from an agile point of view. And the last topic is about monitoring and platform intelligence. How can you benefit from collecting data and monitoring what is going on inside your PLM system?